the best quote I heard on, there are two great quotes on the war on drugs, which I just want to share with you. The first one was from a judge, a very experienced judge, and I won't name the judge, who said to me once, every time I sentence a drug trafficker, Greg, I think I've just created a vacancy in the market. The second quote is from The Economist, which has long campaigned for legalising drugs. There are no wins in the war on drugs, only Pyrrhic victories. And both of them are as true a statement as I've ever heard about the war on drugs. So I just thought I'd share them with you.
No, thank you. And I mean, it's always, statements like that always feel so true. But I feel like now when we're in the middle of a pandemic, we knew, particularly in Australia, that before this pandemic, there were about 200,000 people sitting on waiting lists, not able to get into rehab. The economy is tanking. We are filling the pockets of the black market when we could just do something so simple as legalise, get the tax revenue, have a regulated market, put some of that money into rehabilitation and outreach and all of those support services that are so severely lacking. The war on drugs does nothing to address any of that. And I feel like now more than ever is the time to do it.
The revenues from drug, I mean, if you look at the United States, and we're doing some work on this, the Australian Lawyers Alliance at the moment, but if you look at the United States, those states which have legalised cannabis for recreational use in addition to medicinal use have experienced a very big uptake in revenue. Some of that revenue has been hypothecated for rehabilitation, so it can't be touched by the General Treasury. Great. But it has created industries. I mean, you know, down here, the economy is completely created because of the over-reliance on tourism. I did suggest to somebody the other day, if the government were to set up a legal cannabis market, you know, you create jobs, you create an industry, and you create a major revenue source. And I mean, as Alex says earlier, I mean, we allow bottle shops to open up everywhere. You know, cannabis dispensaries are now part and parcel of the landscape in many US states. And the other point about the US states is you've also seen a diminution in property crime in those areas. So, you know, there are a range of upsides. And the last point I'd just make in relation to legalising is you've also seen in the United States, which has been particularly problematic, of course, is a reduction in opioid addiction as a result of the use of cannabis and cannabis being available.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think at the moment when, you know, the economy is tanking, people are losing their jobs. I don't think it's any mistake that, I mean, trade unionism in the United States is falling at a rate of speed that is terrifying for anyone who believes in labour law. One of the only industries that has growing union membership is the cannabis industry. They are good paying union jobs that are safe with healthcare. We could do that right now. We've got a tanking manufacturing industry. We've got people losing jobs so fast. The economy is tanking. This is what a time to do it. If there was ever a time, it's now. It's now. And I'm hoping that New Zealand can be the example for Australia.
Oh, of course we're going to be. You know, big sister and all the rest of it.
Yeah, totally.
Can I make one additional point, and that is that that's often overlooked, and that is that the current practice in many parts of the world that start going down the reform road is that people who have been previously involved in the supply industry, the illegal supply industry, are barred from entry into the legal industry when it becomes legal. And yet they are the people who generally know a lot more about the details and the whys and wherefores of medicinal and recreational cannabis. And it's crazy to exclude them. They're often marginalized, vulnerable people, and they should really, instead of being barred, they should be given priority entry into the legal system when reform eventually happens.
Yeah, totally agree. Because one of the problems is that if you look, for example, at medicinal cannabis rules, it's almost impossible for people to participate if they've got, even if you have a family member who's got drug offences, you can be excluded. I mean, it's absurd.
Wow. That's absurd. Maki, what's that going to look like for you? Are you going to face the same sort of problems when New Zealand legalises? I'm saying when.
I'm sure we're going to have our difficulties with the law regime, and it's going to take time to tweak it. So, like anything new, there's those baby steps which we're in the process at the moment, and then it's the implementing the infrastructure for all of this to happen as well. Come on.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely, especially for you, because I mean, what annoys me, I mean, I can't imagine how you feel, because I mean, you're essentially offering a very similar service that the Californians are offering, and in California they're deemed an essential service. And of course what you do is an essential service, but it's underground
Yeah.
right?
And you know, it's correct in saying that our growers, our horticulturalists, I think we have to change the labels of our people, you know, because grower means it gives that intent of a criminal act being activated. If you put the right labels on people, then it takes that stigma away. So our horticulturalists who have been imprisoned for their knowledge should be one of the first in line for a job.